Hello, everybody. My name is Meir Magal. I'm the Program Director and Professor of Exercise Science at North Carolina Wesleyan College. I'm also the Chair of School of Mathematics and Sciences. And for this class, for the JET 201 class, I have decided to prepare a very short presentation, and you can see that from the title in a nutshell. The benefits, in a nutshell, of regularly participating in physical activity. Often when we talked about the benefits of participating in regular physical activity, and you probably saw it on the news, they're talking about different things. They talk about the reduction in chance of having different disease conditions, including heart disease, diabetes, lowering blood cholesterol, blood pressure. What I want to do today is to provide you with some real data, scientific data, that actually help to shape those decisions and these big statements that you often hear physicians and other health experts mention in terms of why is it important to participate in regular physical activity. So over here we have a nice graph. On the x-axis we have percentages, on the y-axis we have relative risk of suffering from cardiovascular disease, heart disease. This study is a meta-analysis of 23 different sex-specific cohort representing about 1.5 million individuals. And what we see over here, that if we are looking at physical activity and or physical fitness, the more we do, the better the benefits. So starting by looking at the y-axis, you can see that on the top, if you do 0 in terms of physical activity and physical fitness, your risk is about 1. And it's an arbitrary number, obviously. The more you do, the better the chance or the lower the relative risk is for you to suffer from any heart-related conditions. So for example, if I do 75% of what I'm required to do per week in terms of physical activity, that's going to reduce my risk to about 0.8. If I'm in better shape, it's also going to reduce my risk. Let's move to the next slide and look at some other data. This data is looking at, and we have two different graphs over here. So again, on the x-axis, we have the frequency of physical activity, meaning how many times a week I'm participating in physical exercise. And then on the y-axis, we again see the relative risks. And what we can see in both graphs, one graph is myocardial infarction, that's the one on the left. And myocardial infarction is heart attack, the chance of having a heart attack. And on the right side, sudden cardiac death. We can see that the more frequent we performing a physical activity and or exercise, the lower the risk for us to having these events. In fact, there was a 30% reduction in the risk of sudden cardiac death. This is the graph on the right, and 47% reduction in the risk of acute myocardial infarction or heart attack during physical activity, the more we do the exercise. So for every additional exercise bout per week, that's the reduction that we are expecting. Let's move to the last graph I want to present today. And I want you to look at a few things. So number one, when you look at the top right, I want you to be aware of the solid line that represent active subjects or active participants. We have the dotted line representing sedentary subjects, so those individuals who do not participate in regular physical activity. We also need to be aware what is vigorous exercise bout. And vigorous exercise bout is anything above 60% of your max capacity in terms of intensity of the exercise. The x-axis represents the number of physical activity sessions per week, and the y-axis represents relative risk of heart attack. Again, very similar to the previous graph that we saw. So let's look at the sedentary individual. So we're looking at the dotted line, and you can see that if you're looking at 0 days per week, not looking at the vigorous exercise bout, you can see that that dotted line, it's kind of parallel the baseline, the x-axis, it's at a risk of 1. And we can see when that individual, someone who does not participate in regular physical activity, participate in one vigorous session of physical activity, the chance of that individual of having a heart attack goes from 1 to 100, which means 100 times more likely to have a heart attack during that physical activity. Different reasons. One of the reasons is because it's a vigorous type of exercise. We recommend, exercise physiologists recommend for people to start at low and moderate intensity exercise. That's one reason. The other reason is this person is not participating in any type of exercise. Now, I want you to look at the solid line. The solid line represents someone who is not sedentary but active individual. And we can see over here that from the get-go, when we're looking at the zero line, we can see that that person, in terms of relative risk, is already in 0.5, which means that person, if I'm comparing an active to a sedentary individual, an active subject is already in half of the risk of someone who is sedentary. Excuse me. And then, if this active individual is participating in 1 to 2 sessions per week of vigorous exercise, their risk is only about 15 times more than the baseline, in opposed to someone who is sedentary 100% or 100 times more, excuse me. And then if this participant, active subject, participate 3 to 4 times a week, their risk drop down to about 5 times. And then if they participate 5 days a week in physical activity or more, the risk is much lower, about 4 times baseline. In other words, when we are looking at this graph, we can see that the more active individual is in terms of the days of exercise per week, the lower the risk of having a heart attack during the physical activity. I want to make sure that everybody understands physical activity is fun. There's a lot of benefits. There's some risk. Obviously, there is a cardiovascular risk, as you can see over here, but a lot of the time they're related to pre-existing condition. And in addition, obviously, there's the risk of having different athletic types of injuries. That's what I was able to put in my short time. Thank you again for watching and listening. Have a great day.